Dr. Gautam Ghoshal, who will deliver his keynote address. And the title of his talk is The Hungry Stone, The Occult in a Tragic Form. And he is a former professor, Department of English of Vishwabharati. Over to you, Gautam.
It's a pleasure to speak alongside Dipankar, and also I am very thankful and also grateful to Pancharan Burma University for giving me this opportunity. Now, let me come straight to my topic. My theoretical framework is occultism, and there is a difference between. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, because my voice is not loud. Uh, Actually, there's a difference between mysticism and occultism. Mysticism is our subjective responses to the divine, to the spiritual stuff. But occultism is pure science. And the mother relates occultism to chemistry. And of course, it should be organic chemistry, not the jodo, but the living things. So, this is the value of occultism because it is part and parcel of our life, and we are mostly unaware of it. And the entire psychology of Sri Aurobindo, in fact, which has now traveled to the West through Ken Wilber, uh, it speaks of the different layers of the subliminal self of man, and of which we are not aware. Now, this is a story which is uh, which is very interesting. I found it interesting because I saw the film, though in my boyhood couldn't understand much. Now, I will start with uh, two references. One from the Life Divine, which Sri Aurobindo started writing in 1914, and one from Savitri, which Sri Aurobindo completed in 1950, the year, a few months before his passing. Now, let me start from the Life Divine. What happens? It's a story where people of in the occult plane, they are coming back from 250 years as per the narrative, and they are quite living uh, in a plane which Sri Aurobindo calls subtle physical. And Sri Aurobindo has characterized the planes and has brooded over the fact that even in India, these planes are forgotten, although these were known to the Upanishadic seers. And so, about dying, Sri Aurobindo writes in The Life Divine, when a man dies in great pain or in great grief or in great agitation of mind, and his last thoughts are full of fear, rage, pain, or horror, then the subtle body is unable to shake off these impressions from his mind for years, sometimes for centuries. And there are three chapters in the Life Divine on rebirth. And the last two chapters contain a long discussion on occultism, where he once again repeats that occultism is science, it is not fantasy or imagination. Mysticism can be that because it is your subjective impressions. And the next is from Savitri, Book 6, Canto 2. Sri Aurobindo says about the living realities around us. I quote, there is no visible foe, but the unseen is around us. Forces intangible besiege, touches from alien realms, thoughts not our own overtake us and compel the erring heart. Our lives are caught in an ambiguous net. So our life is caught in an ambiguous net because of these forces. And then in the same canto, Sri Aurobindo writes, a grisly company of maladies come licensed lodgers into man's bodily house, purveyors of death and torturers of life in the malignant hollows of the world, in its subconscient cavern passages. Subconscient is a synonym for the subconscious in Sri Aurobindo's psychology. In the subconscient cavern passages, ambush the lie waiting their hour to leap, surrounding with danger, the siege city of life, admitted into the citadel of man's days. They mine his foes and maim or suddenly kill. Now, this is what uh, Karim tells the author at the end of the story, the unfinished story, as Dipankar has rightly pointed out, that Tagore leaves much unto the imagination of the readers. So they are the desire, the obstructed desire was so acute. And Sri Aurobindo says that the rebirth is not always immediate. They lie in gross form sometimes in the subtle physical plane. Now, what is the subtle physical plane? There is a plane between the pran, the pranic store, the vital, and the physical proper. There is a subtle physical plane, that which the ancient seers would call Shukho Deho. And বৃদ্ধ যাহা কহিল তাহার মর্মার্থ এই, একসময় এই প্রাসাদে অনেক অতৃপ্ত বাসনা, অনেক উন্মত্ত সম্ভোগের শিখা আলোড়িত হইত। সেই সকল চিত্ত দাহে, সেই সকল নিষ্ফল কামনার অভিশাপে এই প্রাসাদের প্রত্যেক প্রস্তরখণ্ড ক্ষুধার্ত তৃষ্ণার্ত হইয়া আছে। সজীব মানুষ পাইলে তাহাকে লালায়িত পিশাচির মতো খাইয়া ফেলিতে চায়। Notice Rabindra's words. They mine his force and maim or suddenly kill. যাহারা ত্রিরাত্রি এই প্রাসাদে বাস করিয়াছে, তাহাদের মধ্যে কেবল মেহের আলী পাগল হইয়া বাহির হইয়া আসিয়াছে, এ পর্যন্ত আর কেহ তাহার গ্রাস এড়াইতে পারে নাই। And then there is some suggestions or advices or some tricks which Karim teaches them how to come out, and that is left in the blackout. Now, these are the planes. Sri Aurobindo says that we have to be aware of these because they are not mysticism, they are occult science. Occultism is a science. And one has to learn the science precisely, and there is no emotion involved here. It is like that. The planes are there in all of us. Now, I have said that Ken Wilber has taken these things to the West. Before Ken Wilber, it was not known to the West. And Ken Wilber is an ardent fan of Sri Aurobindo. He is alive. So one has to learn to like the knowledge of chemistry for material things. And only by stepping back into the subliminal, one can feel them, but it is wise not to explore them. So that is what both the mother and Sri Aurobindo caution, that if you are not an expert, if you are not physically, vitally strong, don't try to explore these things if you are weak. It is not needed at all. But you should just be aware of these things and leave it. Don't try to cultivate. So in the West, occultism was just magic. But in India, as Sri Aurobindo explains, it is not just magic, but it is a science. And occultism is an effort to arrive at secret truths through the subliminal. Now, what is the subliminal? The subliminal is, and here also there is a difference between Western psychology and Indian psychology. Sri Aurobindo explains that the Western psychology confuses the subconscious with the subliminal. But the subconscious is subconscious, and the subliminal is a waking state. What are the subliminal planes? The outer planes are Shorir, Pran, uh, Mon. And behind that, there are inner Shorir, inner Mon, inner Pran, inner vital, inner mental, inner physical. And behind them is the deepest subliminal, which is Sri Aurobindo calls the subliminal, the inmost subliminal or the psychic being. And that is the safest zone. If you can go back to that, you can control your activities, everything properly, and can see everything, the forces, the occult, the hidden forces of life that are operating. Now, this is the difference between, because the subliminal word has been in use in the West since, say, 1770s, even after that, even before that, maybe they have used it, but it was always confused with the subconscious or the subconscient. Different. Subliminal is inner, subconscious is lower. So when you go and grow and become conscious of these things, the inner mind, the inner physical, the inner vital, and then the inmost, the psychic being, then you become aware of the forces of these nature. As Sri Aurobindo calls it, the other nature. The occultism is the other nature. It is very real, unlike mysticism where you have subjective responses. When Mallarmé says, La lune s'attriste, the moon is weeping, then it is subjective. But it is not subjective. Occultism is pure science. And because we must be aware of these planes. So let me come back to the, I will answer over the queries because this is a very new field. And unfortunately, my students are not getting admissions in the neighboring universities because these things are not known not even in India. Why should I blame Bengal only? So the focus in the story is on a woman of irresistible beauty, and that is drawing the collector. It is a vital passion. It is not from the psychic. It's not a very refined emotion. It attracts, it draws. It is a trap. And all her companions are still in the subtle physical. So what happened? As Dipankar has said, Tagore has left unto the imagination of the readers what really happened. So you have to go through the text and try to guess and give your interpretations from the old school criticism, old line of criticism, what really happened. What really happened in Hamlet, what really happened in Macbeth, the old critics used to say. In the same line, I'm trying to investigate and trying to find some clues. What really happened 200, 500, 250 years ago. The narrative captures the sensuousness and also a tragedy not explained. It's a tragedy because if you remember the listeners, the two worlds are trying to communicate, but they can't communicate. And in the listeners, the spirits are very benign spirits. They're silently trying. It's a tragedy. In the listeners, it's a tragedy, and it's a moving tragedy, because those uh, beings from the occult plane, they are trying to communicate and they can't communicate. But they are not harmful beings. Sri Aurobindo has said at quite a few places in Savitri that there are imps, goblins who are always helping us. We don't know them, we are not aware of them. The mother was boiling milk, and the milk was overflowing. So he felt something was dragging her shadi, pulling her shadi. So small goblin, he was trying to pull the mother to the kitchen. So these ways there are some spirits which are beneficial. And then the mother saw that the milk is overflowing. So these are real things. And I guess there was multiple murder in the palace. Because you see, most of the characters are females. They come to bathe in the river together. They are leading the collector to the principal character. And there is also, apart from Karim's warning that they want to kill because they want to possess, a terrible wish to be satisfied, because in life these spirits were totally unsatisfied, and they carry, as Sri Aurobindo says in the Life Divine, they carry these vibrations in the afterlife, and they cannot take their birth. They suffer in the intermediate planes, in the different areas, sometimes in the gross physical form, sometimes they never take bodies again. So these are the signs of the subliminal. And there are plenty of people, foreigners, who are working in the area. It's called integral psychology. So these are desires obstructed. And the abrupt end is, as Dipankar has said, Tagore is a master storyteller, because he is both writing, combining art for life's sake and art for art's sake. He's a master storyteller, maybe one of the greatest two or three storytellers of the world, or four or five storytellers of the world. And unfortunately, he wrote in Bengali. But the richness of the language, I have seen the English translation, The Hungry Stone. It is just a flop, because the vibration of Kuditopasan, the language, cannot be transferred into another language. It is concealed poetry. There are two kinds of lyrical prose. Sri Aurobindo explains in the Future Poetry that there are two kinds of lyrical prose. One is lyrical prose, কবিতার মতো, যেমন সহজ পাঠ, এত রাত্রে কে ডাকাডাকি করে. It is lyrical prose. Sometimes it is concealed poetry, when poetry itself puts on the dress of prose. And this happens in Kuditopasan. There are plenty of passages which are beyond translation. Wonderful passages. So you must be aware of these things, the language, and he created the language. Bonkim showed him the way, and he created the language. He is great because he created the language and he did wonderful things in the language. So something was very tragic in this occult story. So I put the title Tragic, Occult in the Tragic Form, because as Dipankar was referring to Tapobroto Ghosh's observation that it's a love story, it is a love story because something is, the two worlds are trying to meet, and there's a great failure as usual. They cannot meet. So going by Sri Aurobindo's theory of occultism as a science, Tagore's story, and remember that Tagore was throughout his life, he was cultivating occultism. And uh, it is curious that he came so close to Sri Aurobindo without knowing the science of the matter. Because these are the two heroes of the modern scene. They thought alike, they were close, they were fond of each other, they were guiding each other, and extremely close emotionally. And in fact, in 1928, when Tagore tried to met him in Pondicherry, he has been trying that for the last 10 years after the massacre of Jallianwala Bagh. And immediately after the nationalism essays, he told Kripalani that I won't write on politics again. And then came the Jallianwala Bagh incident. So there was a link, and it's a different issue, but their attitude to nationalism is identical. I've written that in a separate thing, in a separate on a separate occasion, but they are on many occasions they are writing identical things. And Tagore's English nonfiction is definitely influenced by Sri Aurobindo's prose, because Sri Aurobindo was serializing his majestic prose edifices between 1914 and 1921. And I have seen a copy of the Arya in Vishwabharati Central Library. There were subscribers from Shantiniketan. And it is not for nothing that he became frantic to meet Sri Aurobindo in 1928. So this is my observation on the story with reference to occultism. If you have any question, I will answer.